I have a secret. Whenever my skin touches someone else's, I can see the person they love the most. 3 years ago, Anderson proposed to me to secure his family inheritance. The moment he slid the diamond ring onto my finger, I saw myself in his heart, wearing a wedding dress. I thought it was a mutual redemption. Until 3 years later, at a charity gala, we stood with our fingers intertwined under the spotlights. But this time, I didn't see myself. I saw a young girl in a faded white dress. In a cramped apartment, Anderson had her pinned against the wall, kissing her desperately while her eyes welled with tears. It turns out love doesn't just fade. It transfers. When he left me dying on a cold operating table for that girl, I let him go completely. Later, that arrogant man knelt in the pouring rain, begging me to touch him just one more time. But I only found him disgusting. The annual High Society charity gala in New York was blindingly bright with camera flashes. As the wife of Anderson Sinclair, the head of the Sinclair Group, I held his arm. We walked the red carpet, bathed in the adoration of the city's media. "Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, could you step closer and hold hands, please?" a reporter we knew called out with a smile. Anderson turned his head. A perfect, gentle warmth flickered in his deep, icy eyes. He reached out and wrapped his long, elegant fingers tightly around my palm. The moment our skin met, my heart skipped a beat. I have a secret that no one knows. Whenever I touch someone's skin, I can see the person they love deepest in their heart. 3 years ago, in this man's palm, I saw myself. That was what gave me the courage to entrust my life to him. Full of anticipation, I closed my eyes, letting the sensation from my fingertips transmit his inner world into my brain. But in the next second, my blood turned to ice. The image in my mind wasn't me in a haute couture gown. It was a young girl with a ponytail, wearing a faded white dress. In a cramped, dimly lit apartment, Anderson was pinning her against a peeling wall, kissing her with wild, greedy desperation. Her eyes were red. She responded clumsily, her hands gripping his expensive, custom-made shirt. That was a side of him I had never seen, a raw, possessive, uncontrollable passion. Buzz. The phone inside Anderson's suit jacket suddenly vibrated. He let go of my hand almost instinctively. The warmth left my palm, and the cold draft rushed between my fingers. He pulled out his phone. As the screen lit up, I caught a glimpse of a text message before he could hide it on Snapchat. "Mr. Sinclair, it's pouring rain. The dorm gates are locked. I'm alone on the street, and I'm so scared. Sender, Vivian." Anderson stared at the screen. A rare, uncontrollable flash of panic and heartache crossed his face, a face that usually never showed emotion. "I'm sorry," he said, turning to me. His voice was low but filled with undeniable urgency. "There's an emergency with our European branch. The board directors are waiting for my decision. I have to leave right now." He didn't wait for my reply, nor did he even drape his coat over my shoulders. He turned and strode down the red carpet. The camera flashes went wild, freezing me there, completely alone in front of the massive backdrop. I watched his retreating back and forced a smile that felt more painful than crying. 3 years of devotion. It turns out the deepest love in someone's heart really can transfer to someone else. I handled the media alone and returned to our sprawling, 10,000 square foot estate. Empty. Dead silent. This was the home I had built with all my heart for 3 years. Right now, it felt like a giant freezer. At 3 a.m., the beep of the smart lock echoed at the entrance. Anderson was back. He took off his damp black trench coat, handed it to the butler who hurried over, and stepped inside with his usual elegant composure. "Why aren't you asleep yet?" He walked into the living room. Seeing me sitting on the sofa, his brow furrowed slightly, his tone carrying a touch of gentle scolding. "Did you sort out the emergency in Europe?" I raised my head, looking at him quietly. "Yeah. It was a bit tricky, but it's taken care of." He walked over to me, leaning down out of habit to kiss my forehead. But as he drew closer, a completely unfamiliar scent invaded my nose. It wasn't the cedarwood cologne I had personally blended for him. It was a cheap, sickeningly sweet peach perfume. The scent of a young college girl in her early 20s. I abruptly turned my head away, avoiding his lips. Anderson froze midair. A flash of annoyance crossed his eyes, but he quickly masked it. "What's wrong? Still mad that I left early?" He straightened up and looked down at me, a hint of impatience in his voice. "Elise, you've always been sensible. You know that in my position, there are things I can't avoid." Sensible. For 3 years, to be worthy of him, I had hidden all my sharp edges. I learned to be the perfect high society wife. I thought it was mutual devotion. He just took it for granted. "I'm tired. I'm going to sleep." I stood up, not giving him another glance, and walked straight upstairs. After washing up and lying in bed, my phone screen suddenly lit up. As if possessed, I opened Anderson's Instagram. A new post stabbed my eyes. There was no photo, just a short sentence: "Even if it pours, I will hold the umbrella for you." The posting time was exactly 30 minutes after he had abandoned me on the red carpet. I bit my lips so hard I tasted copper. The man who had once sworn before a priest to protect me through sickness and disaster was now holding his umbrella over someone else. The next morning, Anderson left for the office early. In his study, I found a bidding proposal for the Southside project that he had forgotten the night before. It was a major project he had been preparing for 6 months. He needed it for a 10 a.m. meeting today. I changed into a well-tailored suit, took the document, and drove to his private penthouse. That was where he had proposed to me. He had said it was a secret base just for the two of us. Now, I wanted to see what was hidden in our secret base. The elevator went straight to the penthouse. I stood in front of the smart lock and entered my birthday. Access denied, the mechanical female voice chimed coldly. I paused, then entered the time the girl had sent the text last night, 0927. Click. The door unlocked. Immediately, I was hit by the sweet, sickening peach perfume from last night. By the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room lay a pair of white canvas shoes. And on the girl's feet were the custom Italian leather slippers I had commissioned an old craftsman to make, slippers that were supposed to belong only to me. The girl walked out of the kitchen holding a warm glass of milk. She wore an oversized white button-down shirt. The hem barely covered her thighs, and the collar was loose, revealing her pale, slender neck. The shirt belonged to Anderson. When she saw me, she gasped, almost spilling the milk. Mrs. Sinclair? She recognized me. But there was no panic of a mistress caught in the act. Instead, she had a timid, innocent look, like a startled fawn. Why are you here? She asked nervously, pulling down the oversized hem to cover herself. I looked at her pure, clean face. It was exactly the same face I had seen in Anderson's heart last night. Vivian. I came to deliver a document to Anderson. I tossed the bidding proposal onto the console table, my voice completely flat. He's in the shower, Vivian whispered, biting her lower lip. The storm was too bad last night, and the dorms were locked. He was worried about me, so he let me crash here for the night. She said it so naturally, so intimately. Mrs. Sinclair, please don't misunderstand. Nothing happened. Anderson just felt bad for me trying to make it alone in New York. The more she explained, the guiltier it felt. Just then, the bathroom door opened. Anderson walked out, drying his dripping hair with a towel. He only had a towel wrapped around his waist, exposing his toned upper body. Seeing me standing in the entryway, he froze, his pupils contracting instantly. Elise? What are you doing here? He strode over. His very first instinct was to step in front of Vivian, shielding her entirely behind his back. He was protecting her. Protecting his sweetheart from me. Watching his defensive stance, the last shred of my hope shattered into dust. You left your bidding document in the study. I was in the area, so I brought it over. I looked him dead in the eye, catching every micro-expression on his face. Anderson's tense jawline relaxed slightly. He let out a quiet sigh of relief. Thanks. You could have just sent a driver. He turned to look at Vivian behind him, his tone instantly returning to his usual arrogant composure. This is Vivian. She's a college student our company sponsors. She ran into some trouble last night, so I lent a hand. She's young. Don't scare her. Lent a hand. By giving her your private apartment, your personal shirt, and kissing her with a passion that looked like he wanted to merge their souls? Is that so? I curled my lips into a faint, mocking smile. Mr. Sinclair is certainly hands-on with his charity work. Anderson's face darkened. Elise, cut the sarcasm. I'll wait in the car. I didn't spare the happy couple another look. I turned and walked out. 15 minutes later, Anderson got into the passenger seat. He had changed into a brand new custom suit. The faint scent of body wash had completely washed away any trace of the other woman. The silence in the car was deafening. Elise, are you angry? He reached to loosen his tie, his voice carrying a trace of exhausted indulgence. Vivian is just an innocent kid who hasn't seen the world. I treat her like a sister. As Mrs. Sinclair, you don't need to get jealous over a poor student. He always knew how to use the most dignified words to cover up his dirtiest betrayals. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Anderson. I suddenly turned, reaching out to grab his wrist tightly. Skin contact. This time, I saw it clearer than ever. In my mind, Vivian stood on her tiptoes, gently pressing her lips against Anderson's. And Anderson, eyes closed, actually let a tear slip down his cheek. In his heart, he was screaming wildly, I can't live without you. I pulled my hand back as if shocked by electricity. A wave of nausea surged in my stomach. You don't view her as a sister at all. I looked at the red light ahead, my voice so calm it terrified me. You love her. Anderson snapped his head toward me, his eyes sharp as daggers. Elise, what nonsense are you talking about? Have you been too idle lately? Now you're getting paranoid? Let's get a divorce, I said casually. The air in the car instantly froze. Screech. Anderson lunged over and slammed his foot onto the brake. The tires shrieked against the asphalt, stopping the car in the middle of the road, nearly causing a pileup. Are you crazy? His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at me. Just because I took in a sponsored student, you want a divorce? Elise, don't use divorce to threaten me. It's not funny at all. I'm not joking. I looked at his twisted, angry face. It's been 3 years, Anderson. You might not be tired of acting, but I'm tired of watching. I'll have my lawyer send the paperwork to your office tomorrow. The light turned green. I started the car again, shutting him out of my world completely. The morning sun did not bring warmth to the penthouse apartment, only a harsh, gray light that filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I sat at the kitchen island of my temporary suite, a modest, quiet place I had purchased under my maiden name years ago, a sanctuary I had never thought I would need. On the marble counter lay the divorce agreement. It was clean, concise, and utterly devoid of the emotion that had defined the last 3 years of my life. I had signed my name, Elise Sterling, in sharp, elegant cursive. I asked for nothing from the Sinclair estate. No alimony, no real estate, no shares of his rapidly expanding empire. I only wanted the small, silver music box my mother had left me, which currently sat on the vanity of the Sinclair mansion. My lawyer, Arthur Vance, adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the document. He had been my family's trusted advisor for decades, a man who knew the true weight of my family name, a name I had hidden from Anderson to ensure our marriage was built on what I thought was genuine love. Are you certain about this, Elise? Arthur asked, his voice laced with quiet concern. The Sinclair Group has tripled its valuation in the last 3 years. Largely due to the social capital and connections your presence brought him. You are legally entitled to half of that growth. I don't want a single penny that has his name on it, Arthur, I replied, my voice steady, though my chest felt hollowed out. Just deliver the papers to his office. Tell him to sign them, and we can end this quietly. Arthur sighed, slipping the document into his leather briefcase. And your condition? Have you scheduled the surgery? My fingers tightened instinctively around my porcelain mug. Not yet. But I will. Soon. 3 years ago, a routine checkup had revealed a congenital heart defect, a silent, ticking clock inside my chest. It was manageable with medication, but the doctors had warned me that within a few years would require a highly complex, risky corrective surgery. Anderson had known. He had promised to stand by me, to find the best specialists in the world, and to be there to hold my hand when the day came. Now, the thought of him sitting in the waiting room made me feel physically ill. By noon, the storm that had hovered over New York since the previous night finally broke. The sky turned a bruised purple, and rain began to lash against the windows. My phone rang. The caller ID displayed Anderson. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And a third time. On the 4th attempt, I answered, placing the phone on speaker. Elise, what is the meaning of this? Anderson's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. The usual composure he maintained for the public was entirely absent, replaced by a raw, vibrating anger. A divorce agreement? Delivered to my desk. By Arthur Vance? Have you lost your mind? I told you yesterday, Anderson. I'm not joking, I said, my voice eerily calm compared to his tempest. I've signed my part. You just need to sign yours. I will do no such thing, he snapped. I could hear the rustle of papers on his end, followed by the sharp slam of a drawer. If this is your way of throwing a tantrum because of Vivian, it has gone too far. I told you, she is a sponsored student. I helped her out of charity. If you are jealous, I can have her transferred to another city, or terminate her sponsorship entirely. Is that what you want? I closed my eyes, a bitter smile touching my lips. He still didn't get it. He thought this was a game of chess, a negotiation where he could sacrifice a pawn to keep the queen. He didn't realize that the queen had already left the board. It's not about Vivian, Anderson. It's about you, I said softly. You don't love me anymore. Perhaps you never did. I'm not going to waste the rest of my life playing the part of the perfect, blind wife. Elise, listen to me. Sign the papers, Anderson. I hung up before he could reply and switched my phone to silent. An hour later, the heavy thud of fists against my front door shattered the silence of my apartment. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. I opened the door. Anderson stood in the hallway, his hair slightly damp from the rain, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He looked disheveled, a state I had rarely seen him in during our entire marriage. We need to talk, he said, stepping past me without waiting for an invitation. There is nothing left to say, I said, closing the door and leaning against it, keeping my distance. Anderson turned around, his eyes scanning the sparse, minimalist apartment. You're living here? In this dump? Elise, stop this nonsense. Pack your things and come home. We have a charity gala for the pediatric hospital next week, and The press is already asking why you weren't at the Sinclair Foundation meeting this morning. The press can ask whatever they want, I replied coldly. Tell them we've separated. Separated? He took a step toward me, his jaw clenched. Do you have any idea what that would do to the Sinclair Group stock? To my family's reputation? We agreed to this marriage to secure the inheritance, yes, but we built something real, Elise. You can't just throw 3 years away over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I walked over to him, stopping just a few inches away. The air between us was thick, suffocating. You brought her to our secret penthouse. You let her wear your shirt. You kissed her with a passion you have never, not once, shown me in our 3 years of marriage. I was helping her, he yelled, his voice cracking. She was terrified, she was alone. And what about me, Anderson? I interrupted, my voice dropping to a whisper. That cut through his anger like a knife. When have you ever looked at me and felt terrified of losing me? When have you ever held me as if I were your entire world? He froze, his lips parting slightly, but no words came out. You can lie to the world, and you can lie to yourself, I said, looking down at his hands. But you can't lie to me. I reached out and grabbed his hand. The moment my bare palm made contact with his skin, the familiar, dizzying rush of his inner world flooded my mind. But this time, it wasn't just an image. It was an overwhelming wave of emotion, his emotion. I saw Vivian again, but this time, she was crying in his arms, her small hands clutching his lapels. I felt the agonizing ache in Anderson's chest, the desperate, clawing need to protect her, to shield her from the harshness of the world. It was a love so fierce it bordered on obsession. And then, deeper in his heart, I saw myself. I was standing in a shadow, a fading portrait on a wall, slowly being covered by dust. I was a duty. A comfortable habit. A trophy that had lost its luster. The sheer contrast between the burning fire he felt for Vivian and the cold gray ash he felt for me made my stomach churn. I ripped my hand away, stumbling back a step, gasping for air as if I had been underwater. Get out, I whispered, my voice trembling with disgust. Anderson stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and frustration. Elise, what is wrong with you? Why do you always react like this when you touch me lately? Get out. I screamed, pointing at the door. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression hardening back into the arrogant, untouchable facade of the head of the Sinclair Group. Fine, he said coldly, straightening his cuffs. I'll leave. But I won't sign those papers. You're emotional right now, Elise. When you've calmed down and realized that you can't survive in this city without the Sinclair name, you'll come back. He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed onto the floor, my hands shaking, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. A dull, throbbing pain bloomed in my chest, a stark reminder of the physical weakness I had tried so hard to ignore. Over the next month, the Cold War between Anderson and me became the whispered gossip of New York high society. I refused to return to the Sinclair mansion. I ignored his calls, blocked his assistant's messages, and returned every bouquet of roses and expensive jewelry he sent to my apartment. I poured myself into my work, quietly preparing to assume a leadership role within my family's conglomerate, the Sterling Group, a move that would shock the business world when it was finally announced. But my body had other plans. The stress of the separation, combined with years of neglecting my own health to support Anderson's career, had taken a severe toll. The dull aches in my chest became frequent, suffocating tightness. One rainy afternoon, while reviewing financial reports in my apartment, my vision went black. I collapsed onto the hardwood floor, the glass of water in my hands shattering into 100 glittering shards. When I woke up, I was in a private room at Presbyterian Hospital. The smell of antiseptic was overwhelming, and the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor filled the silence. Arthur Vance was sitting in a chair beside my bed, his face pale and etched with deep worry. Thank goodness you're awake, Elise, he said, rising quickly to pour me a cup of water. The doctor said your heart is failing. The defect has deteriorated much faster than anticipated. You need the corrective surgery immediately. I swallowed with difficulty, my throat dry. How long? They want to operate tomorrow morning, Arthur said, his voice trembling slightly. But there's a complication. The procedure requires a highly specialized cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Kenneth Vance, no relation to me, who is currently the head of the Sinclair-sponsored research wing. And because of the rare nature of your blood type, they need a direct donor on standby for a fresh transfusion during the bypass. My heart skipped a beat. A fresh transfusion. Anderson, I whispered. Yes, Arthur said, grimacing. Anderson is a perfect match. He is also the only one registered in the private donor database who is currently in the state. Furthermore, because Dr. Kenneth's department is entirely funded by the Sinclair Group, Anderson's signature as the primary guarantor is required to greenlight the emergency use of the experimental surgical suite. I closed my eyes, a cold dread washing over me. Even in my pursuit of freedom, my very survival was still tied to the man who had broken my heart. Call him, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. But don't tell him about my family. Just tell him I need him. I already did, Arthur said, his expression softening. He was in a board meeting when I called. The moment he heard you were in the hospital, he dropped everything. He's on his way here now. For a brief, foolish moment, a tiny ember of hope flickered in the cold dark of my chest. He dropped everything. Perhaps, despite the betrayal, despite the girl in the white dress, there was still a shred of the man who had promised to protect me. An hour later, the door to my hospital room swung open. Anderson strode in, still wearing his tailored charcoal suit, though his tie was slightly askew. His eyes swept over me, resting on the 4 lines and the nasal cannula supplying me with oxygen. For a fraction of a second, I saw a raw, genuine panic in his eyes. Elise, he said, stepping to my bedside and reaching out to take my hand. I didn't pull away. I was too weak, and desperately needed to feel something real. As his warm hand enveloped mine, the mental image materialized. I saw a hospital corridor. But it wasn't this one. It was a brightly lit, sterile hallway, and Anderson was pacing back and forth, his hands clasped in prayer. He was crying, his face buried in his palms, begging God not to take me. My heart swelled. He did care. He was terrified of losing me. But then, the image shifted. The focus widened. In the waiting room of that mental projection, there was another bed. Vivian was lying on it, her face pale, a small bandage on her forehead from some minor accident. Anderson's gaze in the vision bypassed me entirely, his eyes locked onto her with a desperate, consuming agony. The prayer in his heart wasn't for me. It was for her. Please let her be okay. I'll give up anything, just let her live. I pulled my hand back, my breathing shallow and ragged. The illusion was shattered. Even in his panic, his priority wasn't the wife dying on the bed, but the girl who occupied every corner of his soul. Why are you here, Anderson? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I heard you need the surgery, he said, his voice urgent. I've already spoken to Dr. Kenneth. Everything is prepped. I've signed the authorization forms for the experimental suite. I'm going to the donor clinic now to prepare for the transfusion. Elise, you're going to be fine. I'm here. He leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. It felt like ice against my skin. I have to go sign the final release forms at the administrator's office, he whispered. I'll be right back. I watched him leave, the heavy silence of the room settling over me like a shroud. The hours ticked by. Outside, the rain turned into a torrential downpour, rattling against the glass. The surgical prep team entered my room. They changed me into a sterile gown, administered a mild sedative, and began rolling my bed down the cold, metallic corridors toward the operating theater. Is the donor ready? One of the nurses asked the attending resident. Mr. Sinclair is in the donor lounge, currently undergoing the preliminary screening, the resident replied. Dr. Kenneth is scrubbing in. I was wheeled into the operating room. The blinding overhead lights glared down at me, cold and clinical. The air was freezing. I shivered, my body numb from the sedative, my mind drifting in a hazy, dreamlike state. They transferred me to the operating table. The metal beneath me was ice cold. Preparing the anesthesia, the anesthesiologist announced. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the operating room burst open. A nurse ran in, her face flushed with panic. Dr. Kenneth. We have an emergency. In the ER. There's been a multi-car pileup on the expressway. A VIP patient, sponsored by the Sinclair Group, was just brought in. She's in critical condition. My heart monitor began to beat faster. A VIP patient. Who is it? Dr. Kenneth asked, lowering his gloved hands. Her name is Vivian, the nurse gasped. Mr. Sinclair's assistant identified her. She has severe internal bleeding and head trauma. Mr. Sinclair, he's already left the donor lounge. He's in the ER with her. The operating room fell into a stunned silence. What about Mrs. Sinclair's surgery? The resident asked, looking at me with wide eyes. She's already prepped. We've administered the first round of sedatives. If we halt the procedure now, her heart might not withstand the Strain of being brought back under. Mr. Sinclair gave a direct order, the nurse said, her voice trembling. He revoked the emergency authorization for the experimental suite. He ordered Dar. Kenneth and the primary surgical team to immediately transfer to the ER to operate on Vivian. He took the reserved rare blood units with him. He did what? Dr. Kenneth whispered, horrified. He said. The nurse looked at me, her eyes filled with pity and dread. He said Mrs. Sinclair's condition has been stable for years and she can wait a few hours. He said Vivian is fragile. She won't survive the hour without the best team. A cold, deadening silence enveloped my mind. The beeping of the heart monitor slowed, then spiked, then fell into a chaotic, erratic rhythm. He left me on the cold operating table, prepped for surgery, with my chest ready to be opened. He took the doctor, the resources, and his own blood, and ran to the girl who had a scratch. We can't wait, the resident shouted, his voice echoing as if from a great distance. Her vitals are dropping. We need a backup surgeon. Get the chief of medicine. The backup blood units aren't cleared yet. Another voice panicked. I felt myself slipping. The cold of the operating table seemed to seep into my very bones, freezing the last warm embers of my soul. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I only felt a profound, absolute emptiness. Anderson, I thought, as the darkness closed in, I let you go. Completely. I did not die on that operating table, though by all medical accounts, I should have. When Anderson took the surgical team and the blood supply, he believed he was merely delaying my procedure by a few hours. He did not know, or perhaps in his panic over Vivian, he did not care, that halting a cardiac bypass prep mid-induction is incredibly dangerous. As my heart began to fail, the doors of the operating room were thrown open a second time. This time, it wasn't a panicked nurse. It was a team of world-class cardiac specialists, led by Dr. Julian Sterling, my uncle and the head of the Sterling Medical Institute in Switzerland. Arthur Vance had anticipated Anderson's volatility. The moment he saw Anderson leave my side to run to the ER, Arthur had activated the Sterling family's contingency plan. Within 10 minutes, they had taken over the operating room. They brought their own supply of the rare blood type, flown in from a private bank, and Dr. Julian himself performed the 6-hour surgery. When I finally opened my eyes 3 days later, the sterile smell of the hospital was gone. Instead, I was lying in a luxurious bed with silk sheets, surrounded by the warm, familiar scent of lavender and sandalwood. Sunlight streamed through a large window, revealing a panoramic view of the Swiss Alps, their snow-capped peaks glittering against a brilliant blue sky. I was at the Sterling family estate in Geneva. You're awake, my sweet girl, a soft, elegant voice said. I turned my head slowly. My mother's sister, Charlotte Sterling, was sitting beside my bed, her eyes red from crying but her face lit with a relieved smile. Aunt Charlotte, I whispered, my voice raspy. Shoo, don't try to speak yet, she said, gently wiping a tear from my cheek. You're safe. You're home. Julian fixed your heart. It's strong now. It's going to beat for a long, long time. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and touched her arm. The moment my skin met hers, a warm, golden light flooded my mind. I saw a memory of me as a little girl, laughing as Charlotte spun me around in the gardens of Geneva. I felt her deep, maternal love for me, a love that was pure, protective, and completely unconditional. It was beautiful. But as I pulled my hand away, I realized something. The vision was clear, but the emotional impact felt distant. The heavy, overwhelming physical sensation of my touch power had changed. It no longer made my heart race or my blood run cold. It was as if my newly repaired heart had built a shield around itself. I could still see, but I could no longer be hurt by what I saw. Where is Anderson? I asked, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. Charlotte's face instantly hardened, her elegant features twisting into a cold sneer. That vile, arrogant boy, she said, her voice dripping with venom. When he realized what he had done, he tried to come back to your room. But you were already gone. We had you transferred to a private medical transport plane before he could even finish signing his precious Vivian's discharge papers. Did he sign the divorce? Not yet, Charlotte said, her eyes flashing with a dangerous light. He's still trying to play the worried husband. He's been calling Arthur Vance incessantly, demanding to know where you are. He still thinks you're hiding in some local clinic, throwing a tantrum. She reached over, picking up a leather folder from the bedside table and placing it in my hands. But he is about to find out exactly who he married. I opened the folder. Inside was the official press release from the Sterling Group, dated for the following morning. Elise Sterling, sole heiress to the Sterling Group, returns to assume the role of Executive Vice President of Global Operations after recovering from a successful private cardiac surgery. Beneath it was a copy of the divorce petition, now backed by the full, terrifying legal might of the Sterling Group's international attorney network. We weren't just asking for a divorce anymore, we were prepared to dismantle the Sinclair Group's European distribution networks, which were heavily reliant on Sterling-owned shipping lanes. He wanted a business arrangement, I said, my voice cold and clear, devoid of any of the warmth I had once carried for him. Let's give him one. 6 months later, the New York financial district was abuzz with the sudden, meteoric rise of the Sterling Group's North American division. Under the leadership of the mysterious, newly revealed heiress, Elise Sterling, the company had aggressively acquired prime real estate and secured major government contracts that the Sinclair Group had spent years lobbying for. At the head of the Sinclair Group, Anderson was drowning. Initially, he had dismissed my disappearance as a temporary rebellion. He believed that once my money ran out, or once I realized how cold the world was, without his protection, I would return. But then, the Sterling Group's press release had hit the news like a thermonuclear bomb. The realization that his sensible, quiet wife was actually the heiress to one of the oldest and most powerful conglomerates in Europe had sent shockwaves through his board of directors. Worse, the immediate filing of the divorce papers, backed by allegations of medical neglect and breach of marital fiduciary duty, had caused the Sinclair Group stock to plummet by 20% in a single week. He had tried to reach me. He had stood outside my apartment, only to find it sold. He had tried to enter the Sterling offices, only to be escorted out by security. And in the midst of this chaos, his sanctuary, Vivian, had begun to crumble. After her minor car accident, Anderson had moved Vivian into a luxury penthouse in Manhattan, paying for her every expense, determined to protect his innocent, fragile sister figure. But without the stabilizing presence of Elise managing his life behind the scenes, Anderson's home was no longer a sanctuary. Vivian, accustomed to a life of poverty, was quickly consumed by the sudden wealth. She dropped out of her university, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on designer clothes, and threw lavish parties in the penthouse Anderson had bought her. She became increasingly demanding, throwing violent tantrums whenever Anderson had to leave her for a business meeting. One evening, Anderson returned to the penthouse, exhausted after a grueling board meeting where his directors had openly questioned his leadership. The apartment was a mess. Half-empty champagne bottles littered the Italian marble countertops. The sweet, sickening scent of peach perfume, the scent that had once seemed so innocent, now made his head ache. Vivian was sitting on the plush sofa, scrolling through her phone, surrounded by shopping bags. Anderson, she squealed, jumping up and running to him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her lips pressing against his cheek. You're finally back. Look what I bought today. This diamond necklace matches the one Mrs. Sinclair, Elise, wore at the gala last year. Do you like it? Anderson looked at the glittering diamonds against her throat. For the past 6 months, he had been trying to find the passion he had felt for her. But now, with the weight of his failing empire pressing down on his shoulders, her innocence looked less like purity and more like profound, selfish ignorance. Where did you get the money for this, Vivian? He asked, his voice flat. I used the card you gave me, she said, pouting, her eyes welling with tears in that practiced, timid way that had once made his heart ache. Why are you being so mean? I just wanted to look pretty for you. You've been so distant lately. You're always thinking about her. Her. Anderson's chest tightened. He looked at Vivian's face, the face he had once thought was the center of his universe. He reached out, his hand grasping her wrist. He didn't have my power. He couldn't see into her heart. But for the first time, he looked at her with clear eyes, stripped of the thrill of the forbidden, stripped of the illusion of rescue. In her eyes, he didn't see devotion. He saw a meal ticket. He saw an endless well of money and status. He saw a man she could manipulate with a few tears and a helpless look. Is this what I destroyed my life for? Anderson thought, a sudden, cold horror washing over him. He remembered Elise. He remembered her quiet, steady warmth. He remembered how, no matter how stressful his day had been, he would return to a home that felt like a sanctuary. He remembered the elegant, intelligent woman who had stood by his side, never asking for anything, never demanding, yet elevating him in every way. He remembered the moment he had proposed to her, sliding the diamond ring onto her finger. He remembered the soft, breathtaking smile she had given him, a smile full of absolute, unwavering trust. And he remembered the cold operating table. He remembered the nurse's voice. He took the reserved blood units with him. A wave of intense, suffocating regret hit him so hard he stumbled back, releasing Vivian's wrist. Anderson? What's wrong? Vivian asked, reaching out for him. Don't touch me, he whispered, his voice shaking. What? I said, don't touch me, he roared, his voice echoing through the penthouse. Get out of my sight. Get out of my apartment. Anderson, you can't do this to me. I love you, she screamed, her timid facade completely slipping, revealing a harsh, ugly desperation. You don't love me, Anderson said, his voice dropping to a hollow, dead whisper. And I don't love you. I was a fool. He turned and walked out into the cold, rainy night, the realization of what he had thrown away finally, fully sinking in. The annual autumn charity gala of the Sterling Group was the most exclusive event of the New York social calendar. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of glittering chandeliers, expensive champagne, and the cream of international high society. I stood near the balcony doors, wearing a custom-made, midnight blue silk gown that draped elegantly over my slender frame. My hair was swept up, revealing the delicate, pale skin of my neck. I held a glass of champagne, chatting effortlessly with the French ambassador and several prominent tech CEOs. I was no longer the quiet, shadow-like Mrs. Sinclair. I was Elise Sterling. You look breathtaking tonight, Elise, Arthur Vance said, stepping up beside me, as the guests began to drift toward the dining hall. Thank you, Arthur, I said, offering him a genuine, relaxed smile. He's here, Arthur whispered, his eyes darting toward the entrance of the ballroom. I followed his gaze. Anderson Sinclair stood at the threshold. He had not been invited, but his status as a Sinclair had apparently been enough to bypass the junior security staff. He looked like a ghost of his former self. His custom suit, which had once fit him like armor, seemed slightly loose. His face was pale, his eyes hollowed out by sleeplessness and desperation. The moment his eyes found me, a spark of life flickered in his dead gaze. He began walking toward me, ignoring the whispers and stares of the surrounding guests. Arthur, please give us a moment, I said quietly. Are you sure, Elise? I can have security remove him. It's fine. It's time to end this. I walked out of the ballroom, stepping onto the massive, stone balcony. The cool, autumn air was a welcome relief from the stifling heat of the crowd. Outside, a gentle rain had begun to fall, misting the air and slicking the stone balustrade. A moment later, the balcony doors opened, and Anderson stepped out. Elise, he breathed, his voice trembling as if he were seeing a miracle. Mr. Sinclair, I said, my voice polite, distant, and completely devoid of warmth. This is a private event. You shouldn't be here. Elise, please, he said, taking a step closer, his hands reaching out toward me, though he stopped himself before touching me. I've been trying to see you. 4 months. They wouldn't let me through. I didn't know. I didn't know you were a Sterling. I didn't know about your heart. My heart is fine now, Anderson, I said, taking a sip of my champagne. No. Thanks to you. His face contorted in agony. Elise, what happened at the hospital? It was a mistake. A terrible, horrific mistake. I was panicked. Vivian had been in an accident, and she was screaming, and I didn't think. I thought you were safe. I thought the doctors had everything under control. You took my surgeon, Anderson. You took my blood, I said, my voice steady, my heart rate remaining perfectly calm. You left me to die on a cold table so you could comfort your sweetheart. There is no mistake large enough to cover that. She's not my sweetheart. He cried, the rain beginning to fall harder, soaking his shoulders. I sent her away. She's gone, Elise. I threw her out of the apartment. I don't love her. I never did. It was an illusion, a stupid, selfish escape because I was afraid of how much I was starting to depend on you, how much I was starting to love you. He took another step, his eyes wide, bloodshot, and filled with a desperate, pleading madness. I love you, Elise. I've always loved you. The moment I proposed to you, I saw you in my heart. You know that. You have that secret. I know you do. You used to look at me after we touched, with so much love. I stared at him, my expression unchanging. You knew? I guessed, he whispered, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Whenever we held hands, whenever we were close, your eyes would look so deep into mine, as if you were reading my very soul. And 3 years ago, when I put that ring on your finger, you looked at me as if I were your savior. He suddenly dropped to his knees on the wet, stone floor. The head of the Sinclair Group, the arrogant, untouchable king of New York Finance, was kneeling in the pouring rain, his expensive suit soaking in the puddles, his hands grasping the hem of my midnight blue gown. "I beg you, Elise," he sobbed, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking violently. "Just touch me. Touch me just one more time. Look into my heart. See what's inside. I swear to you, it's only you. It's always been you. Please, just touch me." I looked down at him. In the past, seeing him like this would have torn my heart to pieces. I would have knelt beside him, wrapped my arms around him, and forgiven him anything. But now, as I looked at his pathetic, desperate form, I felt absolutely nothing. The love I had carried for him hadn't just faded. It had been surgically removed, replaced by the cold, strong beats of a heart that belonged only to me. I slowly set my champagne glass down on the stone ledge. I knelt down, bringing myself to his eye level. Anderson's head snapped up, his eyes filling with a sudden, wild hope. "Elise. You want me to touch you, Anderson?" I asked softly. "Yes. Please. Just once." I pulled off my long, silk evening glove, exposing the pale skin of my hand. I reached out and placed my bare palm gently against his cheek. The skin contact was immediate. The mental projection rushed into my mind. But it wasn't the warm, golden light of love, nor was it the fiery passion of his obsession with Vivian. It was a cold, desolate wasteland. I saw Anderson's heart. It was a dark, hollow chamber, shivering in the cold. In the center of that chamber, there was a desperate, clawing projection of me. But it wasn't me. It was a statue of me, made of ice, representing his regret, his lost status, his ruined reputation, and his desperate need to regain the comfortable, perfect life he had so foolishly destroyed. Even now, his love was entirely selfish. He didn't want me. He wanted the salvation I represented. He wanted the forgiveness that would wash away his guilt. And then, I felt my own heart. The golden thread of my power reached into his mind, but instead of absorbing his pain, it simply reflected it back. My mind was a calm, mirror-like lake. The reflection of his desperate, pathetic soul was cast upon the water, and it was utterly repulsive. I pulled my hand back, my expression completely blank. "What did you see?" Anderson whispered, his voice trembling with a desperate, pathetic hope, his hands reaching out to catch mine. "You saw yourself, didn't you? You saw how much I love you." I stood up, stepping back, wiping my palm on a dry portion of my gown as if I had touched something filthy. "No, Anderson," I said, my voice echoing coldly in the rainy night. "I saw nothing." He froze, his face turning paper white. No, that's impossible. You must have seen." "I saw a man who is terrified of being alone," I said, looking down at him with absolute, unwavering disgust. "I saw a man who destroyed his wife's life for a fleeting obsession, and is now begging for her back only because his empire is crumbling and his conscience is heavy." I turned my back on him, walking toward the warm, brightly lit ballroom. "Elise. Please," he screamed behind me, his voice cracking, the sound of his knees scraping against the stone as he tried to crawl after me. "Just touch me. Again. Just look again. I can't live without you. Elise." I paused at the threshold of the balcony doors. Without turning around, I spoke my final words to him. "The divorce papers will be finalized tomorrow, Anderson. If you do not sign them, the Sterling Group will initiate a hostile takeover of Sinclair's European logistics. You have 24 hours to choose between your pride and your survival." I stepped through the doors, leaving him kneeling in the cold, pouring rain, drowning in the dark of his own making. As the warmth of the ballroom enveloped me, and the music and laughter of my new life washed over my ears, I smiled. My heart beat strong, steady, and entirely my own.